Good morning. Welcome to Lesson 3 of English Language Arts. We're going to be looking at this book, Investigating the Past. So find this book and open up to page 8 and 9. We're going to be reading this text called Helen Keller, Words Through Touch. As we read today, we're going to be paying close attention to verbs and how the author uses verbs to write. This text is also an excerpt from a diary. That means it's just a little piece of someone's diary. It's a piece of Helen Keller's diary. She is famous because she, as a young girl, became blind and deaf. And then later on in her life, she wrote her story of how she overcame her struggle and how she overcame the inability to see or hear anything, and how she learned to communicate with the world. So this text is just a small portion of her diary, and you're going to read it today. Remember that we are investigating the past, so we're using diary entries and photographs so far to learn about the past and what things were like in the past. So when Helen Keller describes her life in the past, pay attention to the words that she chooses to use.
Short read 2. Remember to annotate as you read.
Helen Keller, Words Through Touch. A childhood illness left Helen Keller deaf and blind. One of the ways she learned about the world was through touch. This is what she wrote. Once there were 11 tadpoles in a glass globe set in a window full of plants. It was great fun to plunge my hand into the bowl and feel the tadpoles frisk about. One day, a more ambitious fellow leaped beyond the edge of the bowl and fell on the floor. I found him more dead than alive, but no sooner had he returned to his element than he darted to the bottom, swimming round and round. Then he went to live in the leafy pool at the end of the garden.
Okay, now we're going to go back to paragraph 1 and read again. Remember, as we're reading, we are looking for verbs and the way that she uses verbs to describe how things move in her diary entry. Looking at paragraph 1, the publisher begins with an introduction to the text. An introduction is when the publisher describes something about the main character or person in a book. In this particular book, we have an excerpt from a diary, so this tells about Helen Keller's life. So in the first paragraph, it says, a childhood illness left Helen Keller deaf and blind. One of the ways she learned about the world was through touch. This is what she wrote. So we're going to pay attention to the things that she touched and how they moved in the next part of the story. Okay, so before we continue, let's go ahead and make a note just so we can remind ourselves what is different about Helen Keller's life from our life. So Helen Keller cannot see or hear, so she needs to use her hands to see the world. Go ahead and write that note down. If you haven't written it down, pause the video so you can take some time to write it down now. If you haven't finished, pause the video and finish your work before we continue. And as we're reading paragraphs 2 and 3, we are looking to find verbs or action words in a sentence. If you remember, this was the symbol for verbs here that we used in school. And we're not going to use that symbol today because it's too hard to draw, or I'm not going to use it because it's too hard to draw. I'm just going to put a little underline underneath each verb, but you can actually use the symbol and mark the verbs if that will help you remember. So today we're going to read and we're looking for verbs as we read paragraph 2. Verbs again are action words. Those are words that describe what is happening, the action in the story. So let's go ahead and read through. Once there were 11 tadpoles in a glass globe set in a window full of plants. It was great fun to plunge my hands into the bowl and feel the tadpoles frisk about. So as I'm reading this sentence, I'm not going to pay attention to the to be verbs like were and was right now. We're just looking for the action verbs. So once there were 11 tadpoles in a glass globe set in a window full of plants. In this sentence, the word set is our action verb. That's because the person set it in the window. That means they put it next to the window or on a little shelf that's underneath the window, and they set the glass globe. Think about like a fishbowl in the window full of plants. It was great fun to plunge my hand into the bowl and feel the tadpoles frisk about. So as I continue to read the next sentence, I'm reading and I'm going to ignore the was to be verb. It is a verb, but we're not looking for those today. And I'm going to continue on and I see the word to plunge. I'm going to underline that verb. Then we're going to go back and we're going to make some notes about the verbs that she used. So underlining plunge. So she plunged her hand into the bowl and feel the tadpoles frisk about. So as a reminder, Helen Keller is blind and deaf, so she cannot see the tadpoles and she cannot hear the tadpoles, but she can feel them. And she uses her hand in the water to feel the tadpoles. And that's how she experiences what tadpoles are like. Most of us don't feel tadpoles. We look at them in a pond or in a little stream and look at them that way. And then we also have the movement of the tadpoles. The tadpoles frisk about. So go ahead and underline that verb as well. So I want you to notice some of the words she uses. She doesn't just say that she's going to put her hand in the bowl. She says that she plunges her hand in the bowl. So on the side in our notes section, I want to actually write down those interesting verbs that she uses, and we're going to make a list on the side here. So over here, we're going to write the word plunge. What does that mean? So when I imagine the word plunge, I'm not just sticking my hand into a glass bowl of water. I'm putting it in forcefully. So I'm going to write the definition. Or powerfully. So here's my definition of the word plunge. Putting something in water with force or powerfully, meaning I'm pushing it in quickly. We can even add that. Pushing into water quickly. So think about when you go swimming during the summertime. If you jump in, you could describe that as plunging into the water. You go in very quickly. If you kind of walk in really slowly and carefully, climbing down the ladder inch by inch, that's not plunging into the water. That's just going into the water. So that's the difference between plunging into something and just going in quietly. Sometimes we plunge into a challenge. That's another way that the word is used. Another word that I see in the text is the word frisk. Sorry, that. So I see the word frisk. So that's another word I want to write in my notes because it's another interesting verb. And she says she plunges her hand into the bowl and feels the tadpoles frisk about. So when I read the word frisk, I think of something cute, like a kitten or a puppy, and how they move about very quickly. So the word frisk means to move quickly. And if you think about a kitten or a puppy, we could also describe them as very playful. So frisk can also mean to move playfully. So I'm going to add that to my definition. Okay. I'm going ahead and pausing the video here. Take a moment, please, and write down those two definitions from paragraph 2 and make sure you... If you haven't finished, pause the video and finish your work before we continue. As we read paragraph 3, let's pay attention again to verbs, and we're going to underline the verbs as we find them in the text. Paragraph 3. One day, a more ambitious fellow leaped beyond the edge of the bowl and fell on the floor. I found him more dead than alive. But no sooner had he returned to his element than he darted to the bottom, swimming round and round. Then he went to live in the leafy pool at the end of the garden. Let's go back and look for our verbs that we read. One day, a more ambitious fellow leaped beyond the edge of the bowl and fell on the floor. So if we look at paragraph 3, we can see the word leaped is our first verb in that sentence. And then our next verb is fell. He fell on the floor. I found him more dead than alive. A word found is our action verb in this sentence. But no sooner had he returned to his element than he darted to the bottom, swimming around and round. Then he went to live in the leafy pool at the end of the garden. So another action verb in this sentence is returned and darted, and then also swimming is our action verb in that sentence. Then he went to live in the leafy pool at the end of the garden. Our last action verb is to live. So he went to live in the leafy pool at the edge of the garden, or the end of the garden. Now, if we go back to the beginning, we can see some pretty exciting words like the word leaped. So instead of just saying he fell out of the bowl or he got out of the bowl, which was another way that you could say that, Helen Keller writes that he leaped out of the bowl, and that's a lot more exciting. So we're going to write the definition for the word leaped, and we'll put that on the side over here in our note space. As we're writing these definitions down, you can write them while I'm doing it, or you can wait for me to show the zoomed in part on the video. In the next part. So we have the word leaped. So frogs obviously jump, but tadpoles don't have legs yet. So Helen Keller uses the word leaped to describe how the tadpole got out of the bowl. So if you think about a fish jumping out of the water, sometimes if you go fishing or something else, you'll see a fish just come straight up out of the water, and that's what the word leaped means. It means to jump really quickly. So I'm going to write our definition, jump quickly. That's what the word leaped means. So sometimes you'll see in a book, someone will say he leaped to attention. It just means that they moved really quickly and got to whatever they were doing. So our next action verb that's exciting, I think, is the word darted. So I'm going to write the word darted. And again, this also shows moving quickly. So he darted to the bottom, swimming round and round. So I know that he's moving from top to bottom. So I'm just going to write moving quickly. The word darted, if you think about the game darts, maybe you can ask your parents to show you a picture of the game darts. But when you throw a dart, you throw it as quick as you can to get it onto the dartboard. And then we also have the words swimming and live, and you guys know those ones, so I'm not going to give you definitions of those. Go ahead and pause the video now so you can write down the definitions of leaped and darted. If you haven't finished, pause the video and finish your work before we continue. Understanding these words, these exciting verbs, is going to help us understand how the character feels. So our next part that we're going to look at is how does Helen Keller feel when she's writing this journal entry in paragraphs 2 and 3. So when we read a text, we need to pay attention to how the characters are feeling. In this case, we're reading a journal, and in the journal written by Helen Keller, we're trying to figure out how does Helen Keller feel. In order to write that sentence, we need to start with our sentence starter. I think Helen Keller feels, and then blank. And then you're gonna fill in that blank with how you think Helen Keller feels in your own words. When I read the text, I see a lot of exciting words like the word plunge, frisk, leaped, darted, swimming round and round. And those words give me some clues about how Helen Keller is feeling when she's writing this journal. She's describing her experience with the tadpoles, and it doesn't say, I feel this way in the text. Helen Keller doesn't say how she feels, but using the words that she has used, you can kind of make a guess about how she feels. So I've given you a sentence starter. Make sure you write that whole sentence starter down. I think Helen Keller feels blank. And then take a moment and write down how you think she feels based on the words and the tone of the text. Okay, that is all of our reading and writing for today. If you finished writing all of your notes, great job. Next, I'm going to play a video of Helen Keller. It goes for about 3 more minutes, so you can keep watching and learn a little bit more about Helen Keller's life, or you can stop the video now if you don't want to watch the movie. So I will see you tomorrow.
In this room sits a remarkable woman. She is Miss Helen Keller. She does not see the room nor the book that she is reading. She sees nothing. She does not hear the rustling of the curtains behind her. She hears nothing. She is deaf and blind. But if you enter her room, she will know it. Your lightest footfall will tell her you are coming. It will even tell her who you are, if she knows you, as she knows her old friend, Polly Thompson. Polly has been with Helen Keller 40 years. For nearly half of these, she's been Helen's only companion, Helen's eyes and ears upon the world. She talks with Helen by a finger system in which each letter has a sign, like this. In reaching out beyond her dark and soundless night, Helen depends most on touch. 2 other senses remain. There is taste and there is smell. Scent, the scent of objects and places and people, tells Helen much that we learn with eyes and ears. But her hand is her chief link with the outer world, with Polly, with Anne, the part-time helper, with everyone she encounters. With her hand she reads Anne's lips. She answers with her voice.